Part 1. The unexpected observation. It was just another Tuesday morning, or so he thought. David had been running his tech company for the past 15 years. He started with just 3 people in a tiny office. And now the company had grown big with more than 200 employees working across 3 floors. Despite all his success and the comfortable life he now lived, David never forgot where he came from. He still kept one habit from his struggling days: waking up before sunrise and reaching the office when the city was still sleeping. There was something peaceful about those quiet hours before everyone arrived. No meetings, no phone calls, just him and his thoughts. That morning, David arrived at the office around 5:30. The building was dark except for a few lights on the ground floor. He took the elevator up, grabbed his laptop bag, and headed straight to the break room to make his first coffee of the day. The coffee machine was his best friend during these early hours. As he walked into the break room, he saw her. Rosa, the cleaning lady. She was standing on a small stool, trying to reach the top shelf to restock the paper cups. David had seen her around before, but never really paid much attention. She was always quiet, always working, never bothering anyone. "Good morning," David said, not wanting to startle her. Rosa turned quickly, almost losing her balance. "Oh, good morning, sir. Sorry, I'll finish quickly and get out of your way." "No rush at all," David replied with a smile. "Take your time." As Rosa reached up again to place the cups on the shelf, her sleeve slipped down her arm. That's when David saw them. Dark purple bruises circling her wrist like a bracelet. They looked painful, like someone had grabbed her really hard. Rosa noticed him looking. In a flash, she pulled her sleeve back down, her face turning red with embarrassment. She quickly stepped down from the stool and gave a nervous smile. "All done here," she mumbled, avoiding eye contact. She grabbed her cleaning cart and rushed out of the break room so fast that one of her supplies fell on the floor. David stood there, his coffee completely forgotten. Something about what he just saw bothered him deeply. Those bruises weren't from accidentally bumping into something. He'd seen bruises like that before years ago on his aunt's arms before she finally left his uncle. He tried to focus on his work, but his mind kept going back to Rosa. Who was hurting her? Was she safe? Should he say something, or was it none of his business? The rational part of his brain told him to stay out of it. She was employed by the cleaning company, not directly by him. Getting involved in employees' personal lives could be complicated. His lawyers would probably advise against it. But the human part of him, the part that remembered struggling and needing help, couldn't just forget what he saw. David spent the whole day distracted. During meetings, he found himself zoning out. His assistant had to repeat questions twice. His mind was stuck on that image of Rosa quickly pulling down her sleeve, the fear in her eyes when she realized he'd seen the bruises. That evening, as he was leaving the office, he saw Rosa again. She was emptying trash bins in the hallway, moving efficiently from office to office. He noticed she was wearing a long-sleeved shirt even though the building's heating was on full blast and everyone else was complaining about how warm it was. She saw him and immediately looked down at the floor, pushing her cart faster to get away. David went home that night but couldn't stop thinking about it. He sat at his dinner table, barely touching his food. His mind was racing with questions. What if she was in real danger? What if something terrible happened and he'd done nothing when he could have helped? He remembered a quote his grandmother used to say: "When you see someone drowning and you know how to swim, you don't stop to think about whether it's your responsibility. You just jump in." The next morning, David arrived even earlier. He was hoping to see Rosa again, to maybe start a conversation and figure out if she needed help. But she wasn't there. According to the security guard, she'd already finished her section and moved to another floor. Over the next few days, David found himself unconsciously looking for Rosa during his early morning hours. Sometimes he'd see her, sometimes he wouldn't. He started noticing things he'd never paid attention to before. The way she moved carefully, like someone who was always in pain. The way she kept her head down and avoided making eye contact with anyone. The way she flinched when someone walked up behind her too quickly. On Thursday morning, he saw her again in the lobby. She was mopping the floor near the entrance. As she bent down to wring out the mop, her collar shifted slightly. David saw what looked like a bruise on her neck, poorly covered with makeup. His heart sank. This wasn't just one incident. This was ongoing. Someone was regularly hurting this woman, and she was trying desperately to hide it. David went to his office and did something he rarely did. He looked up the cleaning company's contact information. He called the supervisor and asked about Rosa, trying to sound casual. "Oh yes, Rosa. She's one of our best workers," the supervisor said cheerfully. "Never late, never complains, always does excellent work. Actually, she's been asking for extra shifts lately. Seems like she really needs the money." "How long has she been with your company?" David asked. "About 2 years now. Very reliable. Is there a problem?" "No, no problem at all. Just wanted to give positive feedback," David lied. After hanging up, David sat back in his chair and stared at the ceiling. Rosa was asking for extra shifts. She needed money. Was she trying to save up for something? Or was someone taking her money? He thought about his own mother, who'd raised him and his sister alone after their father left. He remembered how she worked 2 jobs, how she'd come home exhausted but still made sure they had dinner and help with homework. He remembered how helpless he felt as a kid, wishing he could do something to make her life easier. Now he was in a position to actually help someone, and he wasn't sure what to do. David decided he needed to learn more before taking any action. That weekend, he did something he never thought he'd do. He researched domestic violence. The statistics shocked him. 1 in 4 women experience severe physical violence from an intimate partner. Most victims tried to hide it because of shame or fear. Many stayed because they had no money, nowhere to go, or were threatened. Everything he read matched what he was seeing with Rosa. By Monday morning, David had made up his mind. He didn't know exactly what he was going to do yet, but he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't just pretend he didn't see what was happening. He couldn't walk past Rosa every morning knowing she was in danger and do nothing about it. Sometimes doing the right thing means getting involved even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's not technically your responsibility. Sometimes being a good human being matters more than being a careful business owner. David just hoped that when the time came, he'd know the right way to help without making things worse for Rosa, because the last thing he wanted was to put her in more danger by trying to be a hero. Little did he know, that time was coming much sooner than he expected. Part 2. A pattern emerges. The following weeks were strange for David. He'd built a successful company, managed million-dollar deals, and led hundreds of employees. But now he found himself preoccupied with something entirely different, the well-being of a cleaning lady he barely knew. Every morning he arrived at the office with a knot in his stomach, wondering if he'd see Rosa and what condition she'd be in. It wasn't like he was actively looking for her, or at least that's what he told himself. But somehow, he always seemed to notice when she was around. On Wednesday, he spotted her in the hallway on the 3rd floor. She was wiping down the glass doors leading to the conference room. As she reached up to clean the top of the doorframe, he saw her wince in pain. She grabbed her side for a moment, closed her eyes, and took a deep breath before continuing her work. David pretended to be checking his phone, but he was watching her from the corner of his eye. When Rosa bent down to pick up her cleaning supplies, she moved slowly and carefully, like someone whose ribs were hurting. On Friday morning, he saw her again in the break room. This time she was wearing a turtleneck sweater despite the warm temperature inside the building. It was the middle of winter, sure, but the heating system was working overtime, and most people were walking around in short sleeves. Rosa was refilling the coffee station when she accidentally knocked over a sugar container. The white granules spilled across the counter. She gasped and immediately started cleaning it up frantically, her hands shaking. "Hey, it's okay," David said gently, walking over. "It's just sugar, no big deal." Rosa looked up at him with wide, frightened eyes. "I'm so sorry, sir, so sorry, it won't happen again." The fear in her voice was heartbreaking. She was apologizing like her life depended on it, over something as small as spilled sugar. "Really, it's fine," David assured her. "Happens to me all the time." But Rosa just nodded quickly, cleaned up the mess at lightning speed, and hurried away with her cart. David stood there feeling frustrated. He wanted to help, but how? Every time he tried to show even basic kindness, she looked terrified. The next Monday, David arrived at 6 in the morning. The security guard mentioned that Rosa had called in sick the previous week, missing 3 days of work. This was apparently unusual for her. She never missed work. When Rosa finally returned on Tuesday, David saw her in the lobby. His heart dropped. She was walking with a noticeable limp, favoring her left leg. Her face looked drawn and tired with dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't hide. That afternoon, David did something he wasn't particularly proud of. He asked his building manager, Tom, if he knew anything about Rosa. Tom was a friendly guy in his 50s who'd worked in building management for decades. He knew everyone and everything that happened in the building. Rosa? Yeah, sweet lady. Very hardworking, Tom said. She's got 2 kids, I think. Single mother. The father isn't in the picture. She have a boyfriend or anything? David asked, trying to sound casual. Tom raised an eyebrow. Not sure why you're asking, boss, but yeah, I think so. Some guy picks her up sometimes after her shift. Drives a black pickup truck. Never comes inside, just waits in the parking lot. David's stomach tightened. What's he like? Never met him. But I've seen them arguing in the parking lot a couple times. Well, more like him yelling and her just standing there taking it. Tom paused, looking concerned. You notice something off too? David hesitated. Just seems like she's been hurt lately. Walking funny, bruises. Tom nodded slowly. Yeah, I've noticed. Been wondering if I should say something to somebody, but I don't know who or what to say. Not really my place, you know? I know what you mean, David replied. But that was exactly the problem. Everyone noticed. Everyone felt uncomfortable, but nobody did anything because it wasn't their place. And meanwhile, Rosa was getting hurt. Over the next 2 weeks, David kept observing, and the pattern became clearer and more disturbing. Some days, Rosa seemed almost okay. She'd move normally, smile at people, do her work efficiently. But other days, she'd come in moving like every step hurt, with fresh bruises barely concealed under makeup, her eyes red like she'd been crying. The bad days always seemed to follow weekends or her days off. David didn't need to be a detective to figure out what that meant. When Rosa spent time at home with her boyfriend, she got hurt. He noticed other things too. Rosa never ate lunch. She'd work straight through her break, skipping meals. When someone once left a box of donuts in the break room with a help yourself note, Rosa looked at them longingly, but didn't take one. One of the other cleaning staff, an older woman named Betty, mentioned to the receptionist that Rosa was always asking for extra shifts. Any shifts. Even the worst ones nobody else wanted. She needed every penny she could get. David also noticed that Rosa never used her phone at work. Most people checked their phones constantly, but Rosa's phone stayed in her pocket. The one time he saw her pull it out, she looked at the screen. Her face went pale, and her hands started shaking. She quickly put it away and went back to work. But she seemed distracted and scared for the rest of the day. All these little pieces started forming a picture, and it was a disturbing one. Rosa was trapped. She was in a relationship with someone who hurt her, controlled her, and probably monitored her every move. She needed money desperately, maybe to try to leave or because he was taking it from her. She was isolated, scared, and had nowhere to turn. David found himself getting angry. How could someone treat another human being like this? How could Rosa's boyfriend look at her bruises and feel anything but shame? What kind of person deliberately hurt someone who depended on them? But anger wasn't helpful. David needed to think clearly. He needed a plan. The problem was he didn't know what to do. If he confronted Rosa directly, she might deny everything out of fear. If he called the police, they might not be able to do anything without her cooperation, and it might make things worse for her. If he reported it to the cleaning company, they might just fire her to avoid problems. Every option seemed risky, and David was terrified of making the wrong move and putting Rosa in more danger. He thought about asking his sister for advice. Lisa was a social worker who dealt with these situations professionally, but David hesitated. Getting someone else involved felt like he was gossiping about Rosa's private life. Then came the morning that changed everything. It was a Thursday in early December. David arrived at the office at 5:30 like always. The building was quiet and dark. He took the elevator up and walked toward his office, stopping by the supply closet to grab a notepad he'd run out of. As he approached the closet, he heard a sound that made him freeze. Someone was crying. Not loud, dramatic crying, but quiet, desperate sobbing. The kind that comes from someone who's trying very hard not to make noise but can't hold it in anymore. David slowly opened the supply closet door. There, sitting on the floor surrounded by cleaning supplies, was Rosa. Her face was buried in her hands and her shoulders were shaking with sobs. When she heard the door open, her head snapped up. The look on her face when she saw David was pure terror. Fresh tears streamed down her cheeks, and there, clear as day, on her left cheekbone, was a dark bruise that she hadn't even tried to cover with makeup this time. For a moment, neither of them moved. They just looked at each other. David standing in the doorway, Rosa sitting on the floor like a broken doll. Finally, David found his voice. "Rosa," he said softly. "What happened to you?" Part 3. The breaking point. Rosa scrambled to her feet so fast she nearly knocked over a bucket of cleaning supplies. Her eyes were wide with panic and she was shaking like a leaf in the wind. I'm fine," she said quickly, wiping her face with her sleeve. "I'm so sorry, Mr. David. Please, I was just taking a quick break. I'll get back to work right now. Please don't tell my supervisor. I can't lose this job, please." The desperation in her voice broke David's heart. Here was a woman sitting on a cold floor crying with a fresh bruise on her face, and she was worried about losing her job. "Rosa, stop," David said gently but firmly. "You're not in trouble. I'm not going to report you. I'm worried about you. Please just talk to me." Rosa shook her head violently. "There's nothing to talk about. I just fell down, that's all. I'm clumsy sometimes." "Rosa." David took a careful step closer, making sure not to crowd her. "That bruise on your face doesn't look like you fell down. And I've seen the other bruises too. On your arms, your wrists. I've noticed you limping, moving like you're in pain." Fresh tears started rolling down Rosa's cheeks. She looked at the floor, her whole body trembling. "Please," she whispered. "Just forget what you saw. I'll be more careful. I'll cover them better. Just please don't make trouble." "Make trouble for who?" David asked softly. "Rosa, who's hurting you?" "Nobody. I told you I'm just clumsy," Rosa insisted, but her voice had no conviction. She was just reciting words like she'd said them so many times before that they'd become automatic. David pulled out his phone. "I'm going to call someone who can help you. There are people who—" "No!" Rosa's voice rose in panic. She reached out like she wanted to grab his phone but stopped herself. "No police. Please, no police. You don't understand. If you call them, everything will get worse. So much worse." "Then help me understand," David said, putting his phone back in his pocket. "Tell me what's happening." Rosa was silent for a long moment. She stood there with her arms wrapped around herself, rocking slightly back and forth. David waited. He didn't push. He just let her process. Finally, Rosa spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "His name is Carlos. We've been together for 3 years. In the beginning, he was nice. He helped me when I had nowhere to go, no job, no money. He let me and my kids move in with him." She paused, wiping her eyes. But then things changed. He started getting angry about small things. If dinner wasn't ready on time, if the house wasn't clean enough, if I talked to another man even just to say hello. David listened quietly, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "At first it was just yelling," Rosa continued. "Then pushing, then—" She touched the bruise on her face. It's been getting worse lately. Last night I came home late because I took an extra shift. He was drunk. He said I was probably meeting another man. He didn't believe me when I showed him my work schedule." "Rosa, you need to leave him," David said. "This is serious. He's hurting you." Rosa laughed, but there was no humor in it, only bitterness and fear. "Leave? And go where? With what money?" "I have 2 children, Mr. David. My daughter is 9, my son is 7. Carlos pays for the apartment, the bills, everything. All my money goes to food and clothes for the kids. I have nothing saved. And even if I did—" She paused, fresh fear crossing her face. "Carlos said if I ever try to leave, he'll find me. He knows people, he says. Bad people. He'll take my children away. He'll have me sent back to my country." "Is that possible? Can he really do that?" David asked. Rosa shrugged helplessly. "I don't know. Maybe yes, maybe no. But I can't risk it. My kids, they're everything to me. They're born here, they're American citizens, but me, my papers, they're complicated. Carlos handles all of that. He says I need him. That without him I have nothing, I am nothing." David felt anger rising in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. Getting angry wouldn't help Rosa right now. Listen to me, he said, looking directly into her eyes. That's not true. You're a human being with rights. There are laws to protect you. There are places you can go, people who can help. You don't have to live like this. You don't understand, Rosa said, shaking her head. It's not that simple. Where I come from, you don't leave. You don't call the police. You deal with it. And besides, sometimes he's good to me. When he's not drinking, when he's not stressed about money, he can be sweet. He tells me he's sorry. He promises he'll change. David had heard this before. He'd read about it during his research on domestic violence. The cycle of abuse, violence, followed by apologies and promises, followed by a honeymoon period, followed by tension building, followed by more violence. Round and round it went, but he doesn't change, does he? David asked gently. Rosa's face crumpled. She shook her head slowly. No, he doesn't change. It just keeps getting worse. They stood in silence for a moment. Rosa looked utterly defeated, like someone who'd given up hope a long time ago and was just going through the motions of survival. Rosa, I want to help you, David said, but I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Rosa looked at him with red, swollen eyes. Why would you help me? You don't even know me. I'm just the cleaning lady. You're not just anything, David said firmly. You're a person who deserves to be safe. You're a mother trying to protect her children, and right now you need help. So let me help you. What can you possibly do? Rosa asked, her voice tired and hopeless. I don't know yet, David admitted honestly, but I have resources. I have connections. My sister runs a shelter for women in situations exactly like yours. There are lawyers who handle these cases. There are safe places you can go with your children. Carlos will find me, Rosa said, her voice flat. Not if we do this right, David replied. Look, I'm not going to lie to you and say this will be easy. It won't be. It's going to be scary and difficult. But staying with someone who hurts you, that's not a life. That's not what you want for yourself or your kids. Rosa was quiet again, thinking. David could see the war going on in her mind. Fear versus hope. Familiar misery versus unknown possibility. My kids, she finally said. If I do this, if I try to leave, my kids have to be safe. That's the only thing that matters. I understand, David said. Your kids will be protected. I promise you that. How can you promise that? Rosa asked, a hint of desperation in her voice. Because I won't let anything happen to them or to you, David said with conviction. I know I'm asking you to trust me, and I know that's hard. But Rosa, look at yourself. Look at where you are right now. Hiding in a supply closet, crying, hurt, terrified. Is this the life you want? Is this the example you want to set for your children? Those words seemed to hit Rosa hard. She touched her bruised face again and closed her eyes. My daughter, she whispered. Last week she asked me why I always had bruises. She's starting to notice. And my son, he's becoming scared of Carlos. He hides when Carlos comes home. Then let's change that, David said. Today, right now. Let's take the first step. Rosa looked at him for a long moment. David could see her wavering, could see the hope starting to fight against the fear. What's the first step? She asked quietly. David pulled out his phone. I'm going to call my sister. Just to talk. No pressure, no commitment. Just a conversation. She'll explain your options, what resources are available, what the process looks like. After that, you decide. Is that okay? Rosa hesitated, then slowly nodded. Just to talk? Just to talk, David confirmed. Nothing happens without your permission. As David dialed his sister's number, he saw Rosa wipe her face one more time and straighten her shoulders just a little bit. It wasn't much, but it was something. It was a beginning. And sometimes all it takes is one person who's willing to help and another person who's finally ready to accept that help. Sometimes that's all it takes to change everything. Part 4. An unconventional plan. David's sister Lisa picked up after 3 rings. Hey, brother. This is early even for you. What's up? Lisa, I need your help. I'm at the office with someone who needs to talk to you. She's in a domestic violence situation. David glanced at Rosa, who was nervously chewing her thumbnail. Can you come down here? Like as soon as possible? There was a brief pause. Lisa knew her brother well enough to know he wouldn't ask unless it was serious. I'm leaving right now. Give me 20 minutes. David hung up and looked at Rosa. She's on her way. Lisa is really good at what she does. She's helped hundreds of women in situations like yours. Rosa nodded but didn't say anything. She'd moved from the supply closet to David's office, where she sat on the edge of a chair looking like she might bolt at any second. Her hands kept twisting in her lap, and she kept glancing at the door. "Would you like some water?" "Coffee?" David offered. "Water would be nice," Rosa said quietly. David went to get water and also texted his assistant to cancel his morning meetings. Whatever happened today, Rosa was his priority. When he came back, Rosa was staring at a family photo on his desk. David with his mother and sister at his college graduation, all of them smiling. "Your mother looks kind," Rosa said. "She was," David replied, handing her the water. "She passed away 5 years ago. But yeah, she was the kindest person I ever knew. Raised me and Lisa on her own after our dad left. Worked 2 jobs to keep us fed and in school." Rosa smiled sadly. "She would be proud of what you're doing today." "I hope so," David said. "I'm just trying to do what she would have done." They sat in comfortable silence until Lisa arrived, slightly out of breath from rushing. She was a petite woman in her early 40s with kind eyes and an air of calm confidence. "Hi, you must be Rosa," Lisa said, extending her hand. "I'm Lisa. Thank you for being brave enough to talk with me." Rosa shook her hand hesitantly. "I don't feel very brave." "That's okay," Lisa said, pulling up a chair. "Bravery doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do the right thing even when you are scared, and you're here, which is already a huge step." Over the next hour, Lisa talked with Rosa. David mostly stayed quiet, letting his sister do what she did best. Lisa didn't push or judge. She just listened, asked gentle questions, and explained things clearly. She told Rosa about the shelter, a safe place where she and her children could stay while figuring out next steps. She explained that there were legal protections available, that domestic violence was a serious crime, and that Rosa had rights regardless of her immigration status. "But Carlos said he could have me deported," Rosa interjected. "He said he knows people in immigration." Lisa shook her head firmly. "That's a common threat abusers use to maintain control. The truth is, victims of domestic violence can actually qualify for special protection under immigration law. There's something called a U visa, which is specifically for victims of violent crimes who cooperate with law enforcement." "Really?" Rosa looked shocked. "I didn't know that. Most people don't," Lisa said. "And abusers count on that. They use fear and misinformation to keep their victims trapped. But Rosa, you have more power here than you think." "What about my kids?" Rosa asked, her voice cracking. "What if he tries to take them?" "If you come to the shelter, you'll have legal support," Lisa explained. "We work with lawyers who handle custody issues. If you have primary custody of your children and there's documented abuse, the courts will protect them." "Carlos can't just take them." Rosa was quiet for a moment, absorbing all this information. "How long can I stay at the shelter?" "As long as you need," Lisa said. "Some women stay a few weeks, some a few months. It depends on your situation. During that time, we help you find permanent housing, employment, childcare, whatever you need to rebuild your life independently." "Employment," Rosa repeated, looking down. "I only have this cleaning job. It's not enough to support me and 2 kids. That's when David spoke up. "Actually, I've been thinking about that." Both women looked at him. "Rosa, what if I hired you directly? Not through the cleaning company, but as a regular employee here at the company?" Rosa's eyes widened. "What? Why would you do that?" "Because you're a hard worker, you're reliable, and you deserve better than what you have now," David said. "I could create a position, maybe something in facilities coordination. It would come with better pay, health insurance, benefits, and normal daytime hours so you can be with your kids after school." I don't understand," Rosa stammered. "You barely know me." "I know enough," David said simply. "I know you show up every day. You do good work, and you're trying your best in an impossible situation. That's enough for me." Lisa smiled at her brother, pride evident in her eyes. "See? You've got people on your side, Rosa. You're not alone in this." Tears started flowing down Rosa's face again, but this time they looked different. Not tears of despair, but tears of overwhelmed gratitude. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Say you'll let us help you," David said. Rosa wiped her eyes and took a shaky breath. "Okay, yes, I'll do it. I'll go to the shelter. When's Carlos expecting you home?" Lisa asked, switching into practical mode. "He's working construction today. He won't be back until 6 or 7 tonight." "Perfect," Lisa said. We'll get you and your kids out this afternoon. Is there anything important you need to get from the apartment? Rosa thought for a moment. Papers, birth certificates, school records, some clothes, the kids' toys if possible. We'll make it happen, Lisa assured her. But Rosa, you need to understand something. Once you leave, you can't go back, not even to get something you forgot. It's not safe. I understand, Rosa said firmly. And he's going to try to contact you, Lisa continued. He'll call, text, maybe show up at places he knows you go. He'll apologize, promise to change, maybe threaten you. You need to be prepared for that. Rosa's resolve faltered slightly. What if he really does change this time? Lisa leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. Rosa, in my 15 years of doing this work, I've seen hundreds of cases. Men like Carlos don't change without serious intervention, therapy, accountability, real consequences. And even then, it's rare. The violence always escalates, always. The question isn't if it will get worse, but when. Rosa nodded slowly. I know. I've been telling myself he'll change for 2 years now. He never does. Then it's time to change your situation instead, Lisa said. You ready to do this? Rosa looked at David, then at Lisa, then down at her hands. David could see her gathering courage, making the decision to finally choose herself and her children over the familiar prison of her relationship with Carlos. Yes, Rosa said, her voice stronger now. I'm ready. The rest of the morning was a whirlwind of activity. Lisa made phone calls to the shelter, to a lawyer friend who specialized in domestic violence cases, and to a counselor. David spoke with his HR director, Janet, explaining the situation and his plan to hire Rosa directly. Janet was surprised but supportive. That's incredibly generous of you, David. Are you sure about this? I mean, it's a big commitment. I'm sure, David said without hesitation. Sometimes doing the right thing is more important than doing the conventional thing. What position are you creating for her? Facilities coordinator, David said. She'll oversee building maintenance, manage vendor relationships, that kind of thing. I'll mentor her, help her learn the ropes, and let's make sure she gets full benefits from day one. I'll draw up the paperwork, Janet said. By noon, Lisa had everything arranged. She'd pick Rosa up after her shift. They'd go get her children from school, swing by the apartment to get essentials while Carlos was at work, and head to the shelter. A lawyer would meet them there to start the paperwork for a restraining order. Before Rosa left David's office, she turned to him with tears in her eyes. Why are you doing all this for me? You could lose money, face problems with your company. Why risk all that? David thought about his mother, about his aunt who'd finally escaped her abusive husband, about every person who'd ever helped him when he was struggling. Because that's what decent people do, he said. We help each other. And because no one deserves to live in fear in their own home, you and your kids deserve better, Rosa. This is just me helping you get there. Rosa hugged him quickly, then pulled back embarrassed. Thank you. I'll work hard. I'll make you proud. I promise. I know you will, David said with a smile. As Rosa left to finish her shift before the big move, David sat at his desk feeling a mix of emotions. He was hopeful but also worried. He knew the next few weeks would be difficult. Carlos wouldn't let Rosa go without a fight. There would be complications, challenges, maybe even danger. But looking at Rosa's face when she'd said yes, when she'd chosen to save herself and her children, David knew they were doing the right thing. Whatever came next, they'd face it together, and that had to count for something. Part 5. The Dangerous Transition. The first few days after Rosa moved into the shelter were tense and chaotic. Lisa called David every evening with updates, and each call made him realize just how dangerous the situation was. He's already figured out she's gone, Lisa said on the second night. She's been getting calls nonstop. Voicemails ranging from "baby, I'm sorry" to threats I won't repeat. She's terrified but holding strong. David felt his jaw clench. What about the kids? Are they okay? Scared but safe. Her daughter keeps asking when they can go home. Rosa's doing her best to explain, but it's hard. By the end of the first week, things escalated. Carlos started showing up at the office building. The first time he came during business hours, demanding to see Rosa. The security guard at the front desk, a retired cop named Frank, handled it professionally. I'm sorry, sir, but there's no one by that name working here, Frank said calmly. Don't lie to me, Carlos shouted. I know she works here. She cleans the offices. Let me in. "Sir, I'm going to need you to leave the premises. If you don't, I'll have to call the police." Carlos glared at Frank, his hands balled into fists. For a moment, it looked like he might try to force his way past. But Frank stood his ground, hand ready on his radio, and eventually Carlos stormed out, cursing loudly. Frank immediately called David. "Boss, we might have a problem." That guy looked like trouble. Really agitated, aggressive body language. "I've seen that type before." "Thanks for handling that, Frank," David said. "He might come back. If he does, call the police immediately. And can you make sure all the other guards know to watch for him?" "Already on it," Frank confirmed. But Carlos did come back. 2 days later, he appeared in the parking lot during the evening shift change. This time, David was there. He'd been working late when Frank called. "That guy's back, sir." "In the parking lot." "Not technically on our property, but he's watching the entrance." David looked out his office window and saw Carlos leaning against a black pickup truck, smoking a cigarette and staring at the building entrance. Every time someone came out, Carlos would straighten up, look at them, then slump back down when he realized it wasn't Rosa. David made a decision. He called the police and explained the situation, that they had an employee being stalked by her abusive ex-partner, that a restraining order had been filed but not yet granted, and that the man was currently lurking in their parking lot. 2 police officers arrived within 15 minutes. They approached Carlos, talked to him, and eventually he drove away. But David knew this wasn't over. He called Lisa that night. "This isn't working. He's not going to stop. Rosa can't live like this, constantly looking over her shoulder." "I know," Lisa said with a sigh. "But legally, until the restraining order is granted, our options are limited." "When's the hearing?" "Next week. The lawyer is confident it'll be granted. Especially with the hospital records Rosa finally agreed to request and the photos we took of her bruises." "Hospital records?" David hadn't known about those. "Yeah," Lisa said quietly. "Turns out Rosa went to the emergency room twice in the past year. Once for bruised ribs, once for a sprained wrist. She gave false stories about how it happened, but the doctors documented their suspicions of domestic violence in her file." David felt sick. This has been going on for so long. "It always has," Lisa replied. "That's how abuse works. It's not one incident. It's a pattern that gradually gets worse." The following Monday, David implemented additional security measures. He hired a private security escort service to walk Rosa to and from her car when she came to the office for training with Janet. He also had the company's legal team draft a formal trespass notice against Carlos. Rosa was grateful but also embarrassed. "I'm causing so much trouble," she said during one of their meetings. "Maybe I should just quit, go somewhere else where he can't find me." "Absolutely not," David said firmly. "You're not the problem here, he is. You have every right to work and live your life without fear. We're not giving him that power." But despite all their precautions, Carlos found ways to make his presence known. He started sending messages through Rosa's neighbors, people he knew would pass along his words. He created fake social media accounts to message her. He even showed up at her kids' school once, though he left quickly when the principal threatened to call the police. The worst incident happened 2 weeks after Rosa left him. She was leaving the shelter one evening to buy groceries when she noticed Carlos's truck following her. She immediately called Lisa, who called the police. By the time officers arrived, Carlos was gone, but Rosa was shaking so badly she could barely hold her phone. That night, David got a call from Lisa. "We need to talk about next steps. This is escalating faster than I expected. Rosa's terrified to leave the shelter now. She's talking about going back to him." "What?" "No, she can't do that. David, she thinks it's the only way to keep her kids safe. Carlos sent her a message today saying if she doesn't come back, he'll find a way to take the children. He knows what school they go to, what time they get out. Rosa is paralyzed with fear." David ran his hand through his hair, thinking hard. "What if we get her better legal protection? Can we speed up the restraining order?" "The hearing is in 3 days. The lawyer is doing everything possible." "Is there anything else we can do?" "Anything." Lisa was quiet for a moment. "There might be one thing. I have a friend, Robert Chen, who's a lawyer specializing in immigration and domestic violence cases. He works pro bono for cases like Rosa's. If we can get her documented as a victim of violent crime and start the U visa process, it might give her more legal standing and peace of mind." "Call him," David said immediately. "Tonight. Whatever it costs, I'll cover it." "He works for free, David. That's what pro bono means. Then I'll make a donation to his organization. Just please, get him involved." Lisa made the call and Robert agreed to meet with Rosa the next day. He turned out to be a young lawyer with a passion for helping abuse survivors navigate the complex intersection of domestic violence and immigration law. After meeting with Rosa, Robert laid out a comprehensive plan. First, we get the restraining order. Second, we file for the U visa, which can take time but provides significant protection. Third, we document everything. Every call, every message, every time he shows up somewhere. We build an airtight case. How long does all this take? Rosa asked, her voice tired. The restraining order should come through this week if the judge grants it, which I'm confident will happen. The U visa process takes longer, sometimes over a year. But once we file, you have legal standing and that matters. Over the next week, things slowly started to stabilize. The restraining order was granted, with the judge noting the severity of the documented abuse and Carlos's escalating stalking behavior. Carlos was legally prohibited from coming within 500 feet of Rosa, her children, her workplace, and the kids' school. He violated it within 24 hours. Carlos showed up at the office building again, this time even more aggressive. When Frank refused him entry, Carlos started yelling, threatening, causing a scene in the lobby. Frank called the police while other security guards surrounded Carlos, preventing him from going further into the building. The police arrived and arrested Carlos for violating the restraining order. He spent 2 nights in jail before being released with a stern warning from a judge. "Next time you violate this order, Mr. Rodriguez, you'll face serious consequences," the judge said. "Do you understand?" Carlos nodded, but everyone could see the rage in his eyes. After that incident, things finally seemed to calm down. Carlos apparently realized that continuing his harassment would land him in jail for longer. The calls and messages slowed, then stopped. He stopped showing up places. It was like he'd vanished. Rosa was relieved but also skeptical. "He's never given up this easy before," she told Lisa. "He's planning something. I can feel it." "Maybe he's finally realized he can't win this," Lisa suggested hopefully, but Rosa shook her head. "You don't know him like I do. He doesn't give up. He's just waiting, watching." David hoped Rosa was wrong, but he couldn't shake the feeling that she might be right. He increased security measures, made sure someone always walked Rosa to her car, and told her to call immediately if she saw or heard anything suspicious. For 3 weeks, nothing happened. Rosa started to relax little by little. She was doing well at work, learning quickly, and her kids were adjusting to their new school. There were still hard days. Days when she missed the familiar, even if the familiar was toxic. Days when her daughter cried for her old room. Days when the weight of everything felt too heavy. But there were also good days. Days when Rosa smiled genuinely. Days when her son laughed while playing at the park. Days when she looked in the mirror and saw someone stronger than she'd been before. David watched her transformation with quiet satisfaction. This was why he'd gotten involved. This was what made all the complications and concerns worth it. But late one night, David's phone rang. It was Lisa, and her voice was tight with worry. "David, we have a problem. Carlos broke into Rosa's old apartment tonight. The landlord called the police when neighbors reported loud crashing sounds. When police arrived, they found the place trashed. And David, he left a message spray-painted on the wall." "What did it say?" Part 6. The company's response. The news about Carlos's threatening message spread through David's executive team like wildfire. By the next morning, he was facing some difficult conversations. His chief operating officer, Michael, was the first to express concerns. He knocked on David's office door early, his expression serious. "David, we need to talk about the Rosa situation," Michael said, closing the door behind him. "What about it?" David asked, though he knew what was coming. "Some of the leadership team is worried. We're talking about potential liability here. What if this guy shows up at the office and someone gets hurt? What if there's a violent incident? The company could be held responsible." David felt his jaw tighten. "So what are you suggesting? We fire Rosa? Abandon her when she needs help the most?" "I'm not saying that," Michael said quickly. "I'm just saying we need to think about everyone's safety. We have 200 employees in this building, and one of those employees is being threatened by her abusive ex-partner." David countered. "Should we just throw her out to deal with it alone?" Michael sat down, running his hand over his face. "I know it sounds cold, I do. But as COO, I have to think about worst-case scenarios. The legal team is nervous. The insurance company is asking questions. The board will want answers. Then I'll give them answers, David said firmly. We're doing the right thing, period. But that conversation was just the beginning. Over the next few days, David faced resistance from various corners. The legal counsel wanted him to reconsider the company's involvement. The finance director questioned the cost of additional security measures. A few senior managers worried about setting precedents. Not everyone disagreed, though. Janet from HR was firmly in David's corner. What you're doing is exactly what every company should do, she told him. Domestic violence affects 1 in 4 women. That means statistically, we probably have dozens of employees dealing with this. If we support Rosa, we send a message that we'll support others too. That comment sparked an idea in David's mind, but he filed it away for later. The real turning point came during an executive team meeting. David had called everyone together to address the concerns directly. Around the conference table sat his leadership team: Michael, Janet, the CFO, the legal counsel, and several other senior managers. David stood at the head of the table. I know there are concerns about our involvement in Rosa's situation. I want to address them head on. He pulled up a presentation he'd stayed up all night preparing. The first slide showed statistics about domestic violence in the workplace. Did you know that domestic violence costs companies over $8 billion annually in lost productivity? David said. Victims miss work, perform poorly due to trauma, have higher healthcare costs. This isn't just a personal issue. It affects workplaces every single day. He clicked to the next slide. And here's what's interesting. Companies that have strong support programs for domestic violence victims actually see better employee retention, higher morale, and improved productivity. Because when people know their workplace has their back, they're more loyal, more engaged, and more likely to speak up when they need help. Michael leaned forward. But David, we're not a social services agency. We're a tech company. We're a company full of human beings, David corrected. And human beings sometimes face terrible situations. Rosa could be anyone. She could be your sister, your daughter, your friend. Should we turn our backs on her just because helping is complicated? The room was quiet. David could see people thinking, reconsidering. Let me ask you all something, David continued. Why did you come to work for this company? Was it just for a paycheck, or was it because you believed we were building something meaningful? Something that made a positive impact? Janet nodded. When I joined, you told me this company valued people over profits. That we weren't just about the bottom line. Exactly, David said. So here's what I'm proposing. Instead of seeing Rosa's situation as a problem, let's see it as an opportunity. An opportunity to be the kind of company that actually lives its values. What do you mean? The CFO asked. I mean, we develop a comprehensive domestic violence support policy. We train our managers to recognize signs of abuse. We create confidential resources for employees who need help. We partner with local shelters and legal services. We become a model for how companies can support employees through crisis. The legal counsel looked skeptical. That's a huge undertaking. And it still doesn't eliminate the liability concerns. Actually, it might reduce them, David countered. If we have clear policies and procedures, if we're proactive rather than reactive, we're better protected legally. And more importantly, we're doing the right thing. Michael spoke up again. I have to admit, when I first heard about all this, I thought you were being reckless. But listening to you now, I'm starting to see it differently. My sister went through something similar years ago. Her workplace did nothing. She ended up quitting because she was too scared to keep going there. She lost her income right when she needed it most. Exactly, David said softly. That's what we're trying to prevent. One by one, the executives began to come around. They asked questions, raised concerns, but the tone shifted from resistance to problem solving. How could they make this work? What resources would they need? What policies should they implement? By the end of the meeting, they had a plan. Janet would lead a task force to develop a comprehensive domestic violence support policy. They'd bring in experts to train managers and HR staff. They'd partner with local organizations to provide resources, and they'd make sure every employee knew these resources existed. One more thing, David added. I want Rosa involved in this. She has first-hand experience. Her perspective is invaluable. You think she'd be willing? Janet asked. Only one way to find out. When David approached Rosa about it, she was hesitant at first. I don't know if I can talk about it publicly, she said. It's still so fresh, so painful. You don't have to share anything you're not comfortable with, David assured her. But your insight could help shape policies that might help other people in similar situations. You could turn your experience into something that makes a real difference. Rosa thought about it for a few days. Then she came back to David with an answer. Okay, I'll do it. But on one condition, I want to help create a peer support program. Sometimes what people need most is to talk to someone who's been through it, someone who understands. That's a brilliant idea, David said. Word of what was happening began to spread through the company. The response was overwhelming, and not in the way David had feared. Instead of complaints or concerns, employees started reaching out to offer support. A group of women from the accounting department organized a fundraiser for Rosa. They collected money to help her furnish her new apartment, buy clothes for her kids, cover expenses the shelter couldn't handle. They raised over $5,000 in just 2 weeks. The IT department donated old but functional computers and tablets for Rosa's children to use for schoolwork. The marketing team put together a care package full of household items, gift cards to grocery stores and toys for the kids. Even more surprisingly, several employees came forward confidentially to Janet, sharing that they too had experienced domestic violence. Some were currently in abusive relationships, others had escaped years ago. All of them said they'd been too afraid to ask for help, worried about losing their jobs or being judged. One woman, Sarah from the sales team, told Janet through tears, I've been with my partner for 8 years. He's been hurting me for 6. I kept thinking I had to keep it secret, that if anyone at work found out I'd be seen as weak or incompetent. But seeing the company support Rosa like this, it gives me hope that maybe I can get help too. Janet connected Sarah with resources and support, and within a month Sarah had moved to a safe location with her teenage daughter. She continued working, and her performance actually improved once she was free from the constant stress and fear. These stories reinforced what David had known. Instinctively, this was bigger than just Rosa. This was about creating a workplace culture where people felt safe being human, where asking for help wasn't seen as weakness but as courage. Of course, not everyone was supportive. A few employees grumbled about special treatment or worried about workplace drama, but those voices were increasingly in the minority. During a company-wide meeting, David addressed the situation publicly for the first time. He didn't share Rosa's name or specific details, but he talked about what the company was doing and why. Some of you might wonder why we're putting so much energy into this, David said, looking out at the assembled employees. Here's why. Because when one of us is hurting, all of us should care. Because being a successful company isn't just about revenue and growth. It's about being a place where people can bring their whole selves, including their struggles, and know they'll be supported. He paused, letting that sink in. We're not perfect. We're going to make mistakes as we figure this out, but I'd rather make mistakes trying to help people than succeed at ignoring their pain. The room erupted in applause. David saw several people wiping their eyes. He saw Rosa sitting in the back, smiling through tears. After the meeting, dozens of employees approached David to express support. Many shared personal stories. Part 7, Finding Strength. 3 months had passed since that morning David found Rosa crying in the supply closet. The changes in her were remarkable, though the journey hadn't been easy. The day Rosa appeared in court for the permanent restraining order was terrifying for her. She had to face Carlos across the courtroom, had to recount the abuse while he stared at her with cold eyes. David went with her for support, sitting quietly in the back row while Rosa's lawyer presented evidence. The photos of bruises, hospital records documenting injuries, text messages full of threats, the police reports from Carlos's violations of the temporary order, the spray-painted message on the apartment wall. Carlos's lawyer tried to paint Rosa as unstable, as someone making false accusations. But the evidence was overwhelming. The judge, an older woman with stern eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, listened carefully to everything. When it was Rosa's turn to speak, she stood up slowly. Her voice shook at first, but as she continued, it grew stronger. Your Honor, I lived in fear for 2 years. Every day I walked on eggshells, trying not to make him angry, trying to keep my children safe. I stayed because I thought I had no choice, because he made me believe I was nothing without him. She paused, wiping her eyes. But I was wrong. I did have a choice, and I'm choosing to be free. The judge granted the permanent restraining order. Carlos was ordered to stay away from Rosa, her children, her workplace, and the kids' school for 5 years. He was also mandated to attend anger management classes and substance abuse counseling. As they left the courthouse, Rosa broke down crying. But this time they weren't tears of fear. They were tears of relief. "It's really over," she whispered. "I'm really free." "You're free," David confirmed, giving her shoulder a supportive squeeze. "Now comes the next part, building your new life." And build it she did. Rosa threw herself into her new role at the company, with determination that impressed everyone. Janet had been training her in facilities coordination, and Rosa was proving to be a natural. She was organized, detail-oriented, and had great ideas for improving efficiency. One day, she noticed that the company was spending way too much money on cleaning supplies because different departments were ordering separately, often paying higher prices. She created a centralized ordering system that saved the company thousands of dollars a month. "This is incredible, Rosa," Janet said when she saw the report. "You should present this to the executive team." "Me? Present to the executives?" Rosa looked terrified. "Why not? It was your idea, your work. You deserve credit." With Janet's coaching, Rosa prepared and delivered her first business presentation. She was nervous, stumbling over some words, but her passion and competence shone through. The executives were impressed, and David couldn't help but smile with pride. This was the Rosa who'd been hidden beneath the fear and pain. This was who she really was when given the chance to shine. Outside of work, Rosa's life was also transforming. She'd moved out of the shelter and into a modest 2-bedroom apartment. It wasn't fancy, but it was hers. She'd picked out secondhand furniture with her kids, and they'd decorated together, turning it into a real home. Her daughter, Nina, was doing better in school. At first, she'd been withdrawn and sad, missing her old neighborhood and confused about why they'd left. But with counseling through the shelter's children's program, she was opening up, making new friends, smiling more often. Her son, Miguel, was thriving. Away from Carlos's anger and unpredictability, he was becoming more confident, more playful. He joined a soccer team, something Carlos had never allowed because it cost money and took time away from home. Rosa herself started attending weekly support group meetings at Lisa's shelter. There, she met other women who'd been through similar experiences. She heard their stories, shared her own, and realized she wasn't alone. One woman, Patricia, became a close friend. Patricia had left her abusive husband 5 years earlier and had completely rebuilt her life. She had a good job, her own house, and full custody of her 3 children. "I won't lie to you," Patricia told Rosa one evening over coffee. "Some days are still hard. I still have nightmares sometimes. I still catch myself flinching when someone raises their voice. But Rosa, the life I have now, it's mine. Nobody controls me. Nobody hurts me. That's worth every hard day." Those words stayed with Rosa. They reminded her why she'd been brave enough to leave, why she was working so hard to build something new. But healing wasn't linear. There were setbacks. One evening, Rosa's phone rang with a blocked number. Without thinking, she answered. It was Carlos. "Rosa, please just listen," he said, his voice soft and pleading. "I've been going to counseling like the court ordered. I'm getting better. I'm not drinking anymore. I miss you. I miss the kids. Can't we just talk?" Rosa's heart started racing. Part of her, the part that remembered the good times, the part that felt guilty, the part that was tired of struggling alone, wanted to believe him. I can't talk to you, Carlos. The restraining order, I know, but I'm calling from a friend's phone. Nobody has to know. Just 5 minutes, please." Rosa's hand trembled. Then she thought about Nina's smile when she came home from soccer practice. She thought about Miguel's laughter when he was playing without fear. She thought about waking up without wondering if today would be a good day or a bad day, a safe day or a dangerous day. "No," she said firmly. "Don't call me again." She hung up and immediately called her lawyer, reporting the violation. The lawyer filed a motion with the court, and Carlos was brought back in front of the judge, who was not pleased. "Mr. Rodriguez, you clearly don't take this order seriously," the judge said sternly. "One more violation and you will spend time in jail. Do you understand?" Carlos nodded sullenly, shooting Rosa a look that made her blood run cold. But she stood tall, didn't look away, didn't cower. She was stronger now. That incident was scary, but it also showed Rosa how far she'd come. A few months ago, she would have met Carlos in secret, hoping he'd really changed, desperate for the familiar even if the familiar was toxic. Now she knew better. She had the strength to say no and the support system to protect that decision. As winter turned to spring, Rosa made another big decision. She approached David one afternoon with an idea that had been forming in her mind for weeks. "I want to create a peer support program," she said, "for other employees who might be going through what I went through." David leaned forward, interested. "Tell me more." "Well, Janet mentioned that several other employees have come forward after hearing about my situation. They're getting help, which is wonderful, but I keep thinking, what if there are others who are too scared to reach out? What if they need to talk to someone who's been there, someone who understands? So you want to be that person?" "Not just me. I want to build a program where survivors can support each other, confidentially, safely, where someone who's thinking about leaving can talk to someone who's already made that choice, where someone who's having a hard day can reach out to someone who gets it." David sat back, impressed. "Rosa, that's an excellent idea. But are you ready for that? It's a lot to take on." "I think I am," Rosa said thoughtfully. "Helping others? It helps me too. It reminds me why I left. It shows me that my experience wasn't meaningless, that maybe some good can come from all that pain." Together, Rosa and Janet developed the peer support program. They partnered with local organizations, brought in counselors to train the peer supporters, and created strict confidentiality protocols. Rosa was the first peer supporter, but soon 3 other employees who'd survived domestic violence joined the program. They met regularly, shared resources, and were available to talk with any employee who needed support. The program's existence became known throughout the company, though the identities of the peer supporters remained confidential for those who wanted privacy. Rosa, however, chose to be public about her role. She wanted people to see that survivors weren't weak or broken. They were strong, capable people who'd overcome tremendous obstacles. One day, a young woman from the customer service department reached out to Rosa. Her name was Jennifer, and she was 24, recently engaged, and terrified. "My fiancé, he gets so angry sometimes," Jennifer said, her voice barely above a whisper as they sat in a private conference room. "He's never actually hit me, but he grabs my arms, pushes me, gets right in my face and screams. Last week he threw a plate at the wall right next to my head. I keep thinking maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe it's not that bad." Rosa looked at Jennifer with compassion and recognition. "That's exactly what I used to tell myself. But Jennifer, what you're describing is abuse. It doesn't have to be hitting to be abuse. And I need you to understand something. It escalates. It always escalates. Over the next hour," Rosa shared her story, not to scare Jennifer, but to help her see the pattern, to help her recognize that what was happening wasn't normal and wasn't her fault. "You have options," Rosa said. "You don't have to leave today if you're not ready. But I want you to know that resources exist, support exists, and when you're ready to take that step, you won't be alone." Jennifer cried, thanked Rosa, and left with a folder full of information and phone numbers. 2 weeks later, she called off her engagement and moved back in with her parents. She sent Rosa a thank you note that made Rosa cry. Part 8. Ripple effects. 2 years had passed since that cold Tuesday morning when David first noticed bruises on Rosa's wrist. Looking back, he could hardly believe how much had changed, not just for Rosa, but for the entire company, and even the wider business community. Rosa was now the Director of Employee Wellness Initiatives, a newly created position that reflected the company's commitment to supporting its employees holistically. She'd completed her associate's degree in social work with honors, taking classes in the evenings while working full-time. David had established a scholarship program specifically for employees pursuing further education, and Rosa had been its first recipient. The domestic violence support program that had started with Rosa's situation had grown into something much larger. The company now had comprehensive policies covering not just domestic violence but also mental health support, financial wellness counseling, and flexible work arrangements for employees dealing with personal crises. Other companies had taken notice. Rosa had been invited to speak at 3 different business conferences about workplace responses to domestic violence. Each time she stood on stage and told her story, not the sanitized version, but the real one, bruises and fear and all, and audiences listened with rapt attention. At one conference in Chicago, a CEO from a manufacturing company approached Rosa after her talk, tears in his eyes. 20 years ago, my company had an employee being abused by her husband, he said. She asked for help, asked if she could adjust her schedule so he wouldn't know when she was getting off work. We said no. We told her personal problems needed to stay personal. 2 weeks later, her husband showed up at the plant and shot her in the parking lot. She survived, barely. But I've carried that guilt my whole life, knowing we could have helped and didn't. He paused, composing himself. Listening to you today, hearing about what your company did, what your CEO did, it's showing me there's another way. I'm going back to implement everything you talked about. I can't change what happened 20 years ago, but I can make sure it never happens again at my company. Stories like this reminded Rosa why she'd chosen to speak publicly, even though it was hard, even though there were days when talking about her past felt like ripping open old wounds. The peer support program at David's company had expanded significantly. What started with Rosa and 3 other employees had grown to 15 trained peer supporters. They'd helped dozens of employees, both men and women, dealing with domestic violence, and had seen multiple people successfully leave abusive situations. The program had become so successful that 2 other tech companies in the area had asked to partner with them, essentially creating a network of support across multiple workplaces. Rosa coordinated this network, training peer supporters at other companies and facilitating monthly meetings where supporters from different organizations could share experiences and strategies. But perhaps the most profound change was in Rosa herself. She barely resembled the terrified woman who'd hidden in the supply closet 2 years ago. She carried herself differently now. Shoulders back, head high, voice confident. The fear that used to follow her everywhere had been replaced by quiet strength. Her children had transformed too. Nina, now 11, was thriving academically and had discovered a love for painting. She'd even won an award at her school's art show for a piece titled New Beginning, a vibrant painting of a sunrise over a city skyline. Miguel, now 9, had become the star player on his soccer team and talked constantly about wanting to be a professional athlete someday. Both kids were in therapy, working through the trauma of their early years. It wasn't always easy. Miguel still had nightmares sometimes. Nina occasionally asked why her mom couldn't have made it work with Carlos, not fully understanding that some things can't and shouldn't be fixed. But they were healing, growing, becoming the children they were meant to be without living in constant fear. Rosa had even started dating again, though she was taking it very slowly. She'd met someone at her community college, a kind man named Thomas who taught English literature and had patience with her hesitation about relationships. He understood when she needed space, respected her boundaries, and showed her what healthy partnership looked like. "I'm not rushing into anything," Rosa told Patricia over coffee one Saturday morning. "For the first time in my life, I'm discovering who I am on my own. I don't need someone to complete me. If Thomas and I work out, wonderful. If not, I'll still be okay." Patricia smiled. "Listen to you. 2 years ago, you couldn't imagine surviving on your own. Now you're talking about not needing anyone to complete you. That's growth, my friend." As for Carlos, he'd eventually moved to another state after repeated violations of the restraining order landed him with serious legal consequences. He'd served 6 months in jail for stalking and violation of a protective order. Rosa had heard through mutual acquaintances that he was living with a new girlfriend now, and her heart broke for that woman, wondering if history was repeating itself. She'd tried to send information about resources through a friend, hoping the woman might use them someday, but she didn't know if the message ever reached her. That was the hard part about this work, knowing you couldn't save everyone, that some people weren't ready to be saved. David's company had become known in the business community, not just for its technology and innovation, but for its culture of genuine care for employees. When recruiting new talent, candidates often mentioned the company's wellness programs as a deciding factor. Employee retention had improved significantly, and productivity had actually increased. During a board meeting, one of the investors who'd initially been skeptical about David's involvement in Rosa's situation admitted he'd been wrong. "I thought you were being soft, being naive," he said. "I thought focusing on employee well-being would distract from business performance. But the numbers don't lie. Since implementing these programs, our employee satisfaction scores are up, turnover is down, and we're outperforming our competitors. Turns out taking care of people is good business. David smiled. It's not about business, though. That's the point. We take care of people because it's the right thing to do. The business benefits are just a bonus. The investor nodded thoughtfully. I'm implementing similar programs at my other portfolio companies. You've shown me there's a better way to lead. One afternoon, David and Rosa sat in his office reviewing the latest metrics from the wellness programs. They'd helped 43 employees over the past 2 years with various personal crises: domestic violence, mental health issues, substance abuse in the family, financial emergencies. You know what's amazing? Rosa said, looking at the data. Every single person we've helped is still with the company. Not one of them left. Before these programs existed, employees dealing with personal crises would often quit because they felt they had no support. Now they stay, they heal, and they thrive. That's because they know they matter, David said. They know they're more than just workers. They're human beings with inherent worth. Rosa looked at him with gratitude that still sometimes overwhelmed her. I never properly thanked you, you know. Not really. You risked so much to help me. You could have just looked the other way. Rosa, you've thanked me 1,000 times. And honestly, I should be thanking you. Thanking me? For what? David leaned back in his chair. You reminded me why I started this company in the first place. It wasn't to get rich or famous, it was to build something meaningful, something that made a positive impact. Somewhere along the way, I'd gotten caught up in quarterly reports and market share. You reminded me that the most important impact we can make is on individual human lives. Rosa smiled, her eyes glistening with tears. Well then, I guess we helped each other. I guess we did. A few months later, Rosa received an invitation that took her completely by surprise. A national organization dedicated to combating domestic violence wanted to honor her with an award for her advocacy work. The ceremony would be in New York City, televised nationally, with several hundred people in attendance. I can't do this, Rosa said to Lisa, holding the invitation with shaking hands. Standing in front of hundreds of people, cameras everywhere, talking about the worst time of my life. You absolutely can do this, Lisa said firmly. Rosa, you've already spoken at conferences. You've helped dozens of people. This is just a bigger platform. What if Carlos sees it? What if it makes him angry? Carlos is in another state with a criminal record and a restraining order. He has no power over you anymore. And Rosa, think about how many people watch that broadcast. Think about how many women sitting at home living in fear might see you and think, if she can do it, maybe I can too. That you could literally save lives. Rosa took a deep breath. You're right, I'm just scared. Being scared is okay. Doing it anyway is what makes you brave. On the night of the ceremony, Rosa stood backstage in a beautiful dress that Nina had helped her pick out, her hands sweating despite the air conditioning. David, Lisa, Patricia, Nina, and Miguel were all in the audience. Janet had flown in from the company headquarters to be there too. When Rosa's name was called, she walked onto the stage, momentarily blinded by the lights. But then she saw her family in the front row, Nina and Miguel waving excitedly.